Good morning, everyone, and thanks for watching. I'm sort of in the same business as the previous entrepreneur. My name is Geeta, and I'm a professional coach and stress coach with a very nerdy background as an art historian. In my PhD, I explored how art affects the brain, and combining that with my practical toolbox and experience as a coach, I created Art Speaks of You, or ASOI, together with this great team. Now, ASOI is a 5-step facilitation method and self-coaching app that guides the user step by step into any work of art that speaks to you, helping you to connect with your personal resources in a way that automatically also reduces stress. Because research shows that looking at works of art you like immediately lowers inflammation and cortisol levels in the blood while boosting happiness hormones like serotonin and oxytocin that calm down the nervous system. So in the next 4 minutes, I'll show how ASOI uses that to contribute with a solution to a large-scale problem, which is stress. In Denmark alone, it concerns 40 to 60% of people who get public sickness benefit for about 3 to 6 months and often longer. And in spite of expensive treatments, many fall into relapse, and I see them every day in my practice, or maybe not every day, but every week at least, somebody with relapse. So why is that? Well, that's because we typically have a cognitive approach to stress. It's just that stress does not, what happened here? That stress doesn't follow reason. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, we'll move on. Stress doesn't follow reason. So to get rid of it, we need to get behind the cognitive. And Art Speaks of You does that by using works of art that precisely go behind the cognitive because it stimulates important parts of the brain. Now, the point of this is that, and the important thing is that you don't need to know anything about art to use it, not to use art and not to use the app. And what makes ASOI unique is that it transforms the way in which art affects the brain into a neurointelligent technology that guides the user step by step behind their cognitive system, allowing them to connect with the personal resources they need to get better while automatically stimulating stress-reducing hormones. And that sounds extremely complicated, but it's very simple and simply the brain doing its job. So on top of that, art stimulates memory, which means that you can reactivate those resources that you've connected with in less than 10 seconds by checking into your personal gallery, as a stress hit executive has been doing for the past 3 weeks, and it's her screenshot from the app that you see here. During the 5 steps, she connected with a deep need to rest, which made perfect sense because she had been struggling to sleep for about 5 years. And when checking into, so I gave her an exercise, check into the gallery every night. And on the first night, she checked into the gallery, and in less than 10 seconds, she started yawning, and she slept until 8:30. So 3 weeks in, her husband is pretty puzzled. Other fresh results come from a project we're doing with a local health benefit team and art museum. And the setup is has elements of an AOP program, that is Arts on Prescription, which also works behind the cognitive. But our results show that Art Speaks of You create a similar individual effect in 3 weeks, as opposed to the 8 or 10 weeks that an AOP program usually lasts, while using fewer resources and providing a follow-up programs, partly for citizens to use at home and partly for counselors to help citizens implement their insights. And we train them to do that. AOP is an extremely important arena for ASOI, and we've tested it in the program at the Art Museum in Aalborg. And as these quotes show, they specifically liked the follow-up aspect, which a recent report also points out is a challenge in the Danish program. As it says, without any follow-up, it's just been a good experience. So ASSO aims at providing AOP programs with a tool to ensure long-term effect, but also more generally to provide a complete solution that even costs less than AOP programs and traditional treatment, but doesn't take as long and allows participants to start immediately. And to add one more, it empowers users to help themselves and users with a broad reach, because it's equally effective with the executive as it is with the shop assistant that we've just tested it on. Now we're about to negotiate our first B2G license, and we're proposing a cost of 1 day's public.
I don't know if you heard the bell, but you have to wrap up.
Yeah, I will. 2 sentences more.
Yes.
We propose a cost of 1 day's public health benefit per user for a minimum of 150 citizens per year, which is 1/3 of the price of competing programs. But I'd absolutely love to hear your go-to-market advice on how we get as many as possible interested in implementing the ASSO solution. So with that wish list, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much to Art Speaks of You. And if you can unshare your screen, Gitte,
yep.
Then we can see the pretty faces of the jury. And you are welcome to come forward with your 10 minutes of feedback and questions. You can start, Susie.
Okay, Gitte, thank you so much for your presentation. On one of your last slides, you were mentioning the research-based path. There was a lot of information on the slide, so I didn't pick up everything. But I'm curious again to dig into this the research-based field of arts therapy. Can you elaborate on that regarding your solution?
Absolutely. And first I'll say it's not art therapy, I'm sorry, in the traditional sense, at least, because art therapy is about producing something, whereas this is about an experience. So it is much similar to sort of a self-development program. But the research behind it lies in the fact that well, I did a PhD in which I explored how art affects particularly memory, simply how all these, well, partly it stimulates our mirror neurons, which means that we will recognize things and mirror ourselves in art before we cognitively know it. And the method that I've produced is based partly on that and partly on very classical art history analysis and coaching methods. So combining those, I guide people into this work of art, which they choose completely intuitively. And then I use that process to unfold and unwrap their process with questions. So I will not be telling them anything. And in fact, a Canadian user points out that that is his favorite part of the app, is that nobody tells him what to think or do or feel, but there are questions that make him aware of what his answers are. So does that explain your answer, or is there any other? Question?
Yeah. And I also noticed that you corrected me when I said arts therapy, and you say it's more self-development program.
Yeah, well, it's based on coaching, really, and I am a stress coach, so I'm a coach and a stress coach, and I use those methods particularly to guide people to find their own questions. Whereas art therapy, and I have a specific sort of idea of making it not therapy because, or art therapy, because you don't produce anything. So it's about being clear of what the markets are and who the competitors are. So it's a different process to produce something yourself than it is to look at something. And this is actually very undervalued, because we usually connect looking at art as something that you have to know something about it before you can get a real experience. And I'm liberating people from that And a lot of people also say that they feel liberated, that they don't have to know anything before approaching a work of art that they love.
Okay, thank you.
Very welcome.
Can I just ask or Gitte, thank you for your presentation. I was just thinking, I don't know much about stress, but I was thinking, isn't it less stressful to visit an art museum without an app?
Oh, that's a very good question. It depends on who you ask. And I think it's mostly the idea that it can be stressful. The people that we have had through actually find it very comforting. And what they find especially comforting is that they have an app and a tool. Everybody has answered yes to this in the evaluation, that they prioritize having a tool that can bridge the experience at the museum with the experience of being at home. Because once they are at the museum, they're stimulated and things happen, but when they get home, they're left to their own devices. And this is both comforting and makes them feel safe.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question as well. I think it's in two parts really. I have been fortunate enough to have funded many arts into health projects in my career so far, and many of which have been based on participatory appraisal. So that sort of places the user in the middle of the arts, both creation and also the experience and how it links into improving health. It's a two-part question. So one, how do you sort, how do you actually source and choose the arts experience, and why? Because if you're talking about mirror neurons, then there needs to be some sort of connection. And given that mental health and also stress is such a hugely complex issue, then it must be really, really difficult to link into that individual experience that connects in with the mental health that they need. And the so how do you source it? And then the second part is, how once you've actually sourced it, how do you guide the users through it? So because just seeing the art surely isn't enough, but you need to guide them through what they're looking for, and also sort of train that thought process and de-stressing them. It doesn't just appear, but it needs to be sort of guided through so they're able to train and learn and find new ways of moving forward.
Oh, that was a very big question. How do I source the experience? If I understand that correctly, is it how do I create the experience for them? Well, they create that experience for themselves because I give them 10 seconds to choose a work of art that speaks to them. And by that stage, they are already in the process. I liberate them completely of having to know anything about this. They choose it because something about it talks or speaks to them. And once they have, I guide them step by step, first with an introduction to look at this picture, which is a meditative experience. It's about sharpening concentration and focus, and they see things that they would never have noticed. I mean, I have people who choose Monet's lilies, and they see incredible things. After step 2, we get to step 3, where I get them to see themes, again, not to do with themselves. And by that stage, then I make the turnaround. And I say, so the themes that you have seen in this picture, what role do they play in your life? And that's where people start to, oh my goodness, that plays a huge role. And then I dig in, then I go with the coaching. What needs lie behind this? What can you do to satisfy that need? So I don't orchestrate really any experience for them. Unwrapping the experience with these questions that go really deep, because once you know what your need is, you can act on it. And so the app ends with a plan. So what can you do about this? Because when you know what you can do about, so I had a woman who had depression. She realized her need was to contribute with something. And she told me, look, knowing this and knowing where to go to do this just liberates me of that feeling. I don't feel sadness anymore. So, and that was in 10 minutes. So So the thing is that I don't source the experience. Everything happens for the user themselves, and they can do it with Google Arts and Culture. They can do it in an arts museum, and it's just immediate. It's their own individual experience. I hope that answered your really interesting question that I could have spent a long time answering.
It did. Thank you very much.
Oh, can't hear you, miss. Can't hear you.
How about now?
Yep, much better.
Thanks, Kitty. Thanks for your presentation. Really interesting stuff. I was just wondering, is there any copyright issues when building the app? Can you just take any pictures in your app?
Yep.
Or how does that work?
The app is I mean, mostly I use Google Arts and Culture or people stand in a museum, but Google Arts and Culture obviously doesn't have any copyright issues.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to the app, all that data is only stored locally on the user's phone. So we don't keep that, we don't share it, nobody shares it. So it's only local on the device, and that means that it's the user's responsibility, which we also make very clear in a privacy policy, what they do with the pictures. So if they take pictures of a picture that is not, they're not allowed to, we don't take responsibility for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But we have made sure that it's not shared. Yeah.
Okay, I think this was a perfect timing for the 10 minutes, actually.